Hi there, I'm Colin, and I'm the Creative Arts and Communications Coordinator at Redemption Church. We are a radically inclusive community of hope seeking to live Jesus-centered lives, and we currently are in the season of Lent. During Lent, we are invited to consider the fragility of life, the finitude of our existence, the things we have done and left undone, and the reality that through it all, we are beloved by our Creator. The following sermon is part of a Lenten series spent journeying with Jesus to the cross, where we consider how Jesus shows us what it means to live fully human lives amid chaos and death. Now, wherever you find yourself today, we're glad you're here, and we hope this sermon is an encouragement to you. We rely on the generosity of our community, and this includes you, to share these sermons and pursue financial health as a community. To participate in giving, visit redemptionhru.com/give. Now, here's this week's sermon.
Man, I would love to hear Jesus tell this story. It struck me as Dana was reading this passage. What would it have been like? Right? Maybe you're one of the sinners. You're one of the outsiders, the ostracized that is gathered in because there's this person, this so-called teacher, this rabbi that is intriguing, that seems to say things that cut to the heart, but also are filled with so much love. You're compelled and you draw near. And maybe you are sitting there hearing this from that angle, or maybe you are the buttoned up one who has gotten it right your whole life. You've done all the things. You've checked all the boxes. You are the good Boy Scout or Girl Scout. You sold all the cookies. And how they must have heard this story so differently. I wonder how you hear this story this morning. This is a famous text, one that you've likely probably heard before or heard of, and it's one that's very near and dear to me for many reasons, namely my own personal story. I was once a young son in a far-off country living in squalor. I think many of you probably were as well. And many of you have likely heard this story, and a few months ago we actually listened to this story together, as I think this story imbibes and inhabits so much of who we are as a community, what we're doing as a church, and what Jesus is inviting us all to do as human beings in God's world. And I love it because it shows us salvation without doctrine. It gives us a picture. It shows us a snapshot. And I know for so many of y'all in this room, you would much prefer God to hand it to you on a spreadsheet with tabs and everything's labeled. I get that. I know who I'm talking to. But the story, the thing that's beautiful about the story is it's not black and white, and you can read it now, and it hits you in a way that was different when you heard it back in September, and you can read it again 5 years from now, and it will likely hit you again in a different way. I love that about it. If anyone is interested, we're not going to get into a lot of the fun details of this story, and they are really fun and fascinating and interesting. You can go back and listen to our sermon back in September. It was called "Because in Christ, God is Making All Things New." Like and subscribe. That is on our podcast if you want. And I do dig into some of the nuances and the details of it there. I want this morning to look at it from a little bit different perspective. Today, I'm struck not by the details of this story, but by the big giant picture that's laid in our laps that I think we probably want to acknowledge, want to say, yeah, sure, got it, good. But then really actually dismiss. And so I want to start with this and ask just a pretty simple but pretty significant question. What is it that you think God is up to in Jesus Christ? You're like, I don't know, that's why I'm here. You're supposed to tell me, right? But what is it in your mind when you think of the good news? What is it that Jesus is putting on the table for you? What is the thing that he's doing? And I think there's a couple of different answers we can throw out there that are common. Many of us have understandably inherited the idea that what Jesus is doing is Jesus is saving us from one place so that we can then go to another place. So that Jesus dies to rescue us from hell and to make a way for us to go to heaven. This is sort of a popular, especially in American culture, because of the Great Awakenings and this sort of thing. This is the gospel that we have inherited is about getting out of hell and getting to heaven. It is primarily about location. And this is not wrong. I just think it's peripheral. I don't think it is the central thing, right? So when Jesus tells a parable, and I say, this is really showing us salvation, he doesn't really mention heaven and hell explicitly anyways. Now, some of you have come to see that maybe it's about something more than just location. Maybe it's about who we are as like people, what we're like. It's our state of being, our status. And so Jesus is saving us from one state of being, right? What Paul would call the old creation or the old person, and is making us new creatures, new creations, new people. And this is the idea that we are being made new, which so often gets tied up into like morality. And so we are the sorts of people that do morally good things and don't do morally bad things. I think both of these are right and true, right? So this is not me saying, no, none of those are real. Here's the real one. I think they're actually right. Jesus is, in fact, moving us from one kingdom to another, from one destiny of destruction and isolation to one of blessedness and communion. And Jesus is actually changing us from sinners into saints, from scoundrels into holy people, from people who live in some sort of dehumanized state, not because we're not fully human, but because we somehow choose to live as if we aren't. And he's offering us a way to live fully as the human beings we were made to be. And so I think these are right, but I think there's something more fundamental than these. Something more basic, something more at the center of this. And I think that these two that I've named here, our location and our status, are consequences of this primary thing. And at the center of the heart and the whole thing is laid bare for us in this parable. And it is that what God is up to in Jesus Christ is making you whole by reconciling you to God. What God is doing in the person of Jesus is making you whole by reconciling you to Jesus Christ. And what's at the heart of this is relationship. Right? So that heaven matters because God is there. Yet your wholeness matters because God deeply loves you and cares about you and wants you to be all that you were meant to be. I almost quoted like an army commercial there. That got weird for a second, but I didn't. I just said I would, so that was good. Dodge that bullet. Oh, look, I'm full of puns this morning. So I want to start with kind of looking at these two sides, right? God is making you whole by reconciling you. In 2022, the self-help, self-improvement industry market size was estimated to be around $40 billion. It's predicted by the year 2032 to more than double, reaching over $80 billion. Right, so this is like, CrossFit and creams and crystals and it's our attempts, our telltale sign, or like if we're driving a car, the light on the dashboard that says, hey, this is going on in the car, that says that we as a society, we as a people are searching for something that feels missing. And the irony is we have so much. We are probably the most prosperous group of people to ever exist in the history of people. And yet, right, as the statistics show us, we are miserable by so many different measures. We're searching for what Jesus calls life, what the Hebrew people called peace, what we're calling today wholeness. But it is salvation. And I think this is why TikTok is obsessed with the next life hack thing. Maybe you've tried ice baths. Maybe you've done Wim Hof. Maybe you're into brain flossing. Maybe you're going to go home and fire up your 8K white noise. No, pink noise. No, brown noise. because research has said now, right? Maybe you should use this breathing technique. No. Actually, it's that breathing technique. No, it's spin class. No, it's bar class. No, it's CrossFit. No, they got canceled. It's High Rocks now. I want to be clear that mental and physical health are not bad things in our pursuit of taking care of ourselves, right? This is not me demonizing any of that. Please go to the doctor. If you have a headache, please take Advil. If you need to talk to a therapist, please talk to a therapist. I do frequently, and it helps me. Drinking water, exercising, getting sleep, taking care of your body, these are all really good things. These are not bad things. But there is clearly something that we are reaching for, that we are searching for, that we are trying to grasp to add to our lives that will somehow give us something that we feel like we're missing. But what I want to share with you this morning is the good news that God is making you whole. Not Wim Hof. I'm sure he's great. The good news of Jesus Christ is that the peace, the wholeness, the life that you are so desperately longing for is not going to be found in any sort of life hack. It's not going to be found when you suddenly look deep within yourself and find yourself, or find enough resolve to finally and fully get it together. It's going to be given to you as a gift, and it has been freely. And this idea makes Lent especially dangerous for us, because for so many of us, we use Lent as an opportunity to fast or to improve our spiritual life or our prayer life, right? All good things. There's a rich history in fasting that's good. There's nothing wrong with fasting. You're like, I'm so hungry right now. Why did I do this? You're telling me fasting's bad? No. Fasting is great. But so often what we do is we approach Lent, if we're really honest, and if y'all are anything like me, so I'm going out on a limb here, all right? So please come with me. You look at Lent and you're like, yeah, I could stand to like nip some things in the bud. Right? Like, I don't know, maybe I can lose a few pounds. Lent feels like a good excuse to maybe cut out the carbs a little bit, or maybe just skip lunch. Good thing it's Lent. I've had one too many drinks on the weeknights. Maybe this is a great opportunity to just go drink free for a little while. Sober March, I know it doesn't really ring the same bell as the other one, but good thing it's Lent. I need an excuse to put my phone down. Right, and we can turn Lent into an app. And it's this app that we can do this thing that makes our life just a little bit better. But you want to know what Lent is really about? And it's, if y'all know me and you don't know it, man, I wear black all the time and just kind of a weird guy who talks about death a lot. You want to know what Lent is really all about? Let me ask you a question. How's your fasting going? How's your prayer life that you were going to devote yourself to? How's your the Wood Between the Worlds reading going? How are all those things that you set out 3 weeks ago to I'm going to take this on and I'm going to be a new me at the end of this? How are all those things you've devoted yourself to this Lent going? And if you are doing great, get out, okay? There's the door. You don't need us. Just kidding, of course. If you're one of the few that's made it this far and you're free and you're clear of all the things, are you really? So even if you've succeeded in doing the things, are you just forever done with social media? You're you don't ever want or desire to look at it ever again? Are you just completely done with Amazon? I'm never ordering another thing from them again. Are you completely done with gluten? I'm gluten-free, we'll never touch it again, or meat or alcohol or whatever it is, the thing that you gave up, you decided you're going to give up for Lent. Or is there instead this battering, like waves against the shore? There's chatter, this insistent gravitational pull reaching inside of you and drawing you back to the thing that feels so silly and so small and yet has so much freaking power over your attention and your emotions, and maybe even your attitude and how good of a mood you're in right now. Don't talk to me. I haven't eaten in 40 days. So here's a little insight into me. This has nothing to do with what I have or have not given up for Lent, but I found myself reading this week Jeremiah because, I'm spiritual, and these are the sorts of things that spiritual people like me do. And I couldn't get over this point that Jeremiah makes. It's just shot out at the page at me. Jeremiah says, I know, O Lord, that the way of human beings is not in their control. It's not in them as they walk to direct their steps. Eugene Peterson paraphrases this passage this way: I know, God, that mere mortals cannot run their own lives, that men and women don't have what it takes to take charge of life. Now, I know I'm talking to a room of so many of y'all that are type A and highly successful, driven, and motivated people. And yet, if I were to ask you one-on-one, what are the parts of your life that you don't like and you feel are out of control, I bet you could all give a list. I just cannot help but realize how contrary to everything we believe about ourselves and about how the world actually really works, the words of Jeremiah are. And so literally every morning when I wake up, this is pretty typical, I face a real struggle. So again, I'm super spiritual, right? Because, I'm like a professional spiritual person. So I get into the scriptures and I pray to cultivate attention to God. You should all be like me, right? And just about every single morning, what happens is I pick up my phone, because that's my alarm, and I wait for the coffee pot to finish brewing, because I'm not that spiritual, right? I have to have some caffeine. And I face the very silly, very small, but very real temptation of doing just about anything else on my phone except for opening up the app that I know I'm going to read my scriptures in that morning. And I make all sorts of excuses for myself. I need to use the restroom. I'll just check the news. I'm waiting for the coffee. I'll just check this or that. And so even on the morning that I wrote this, I opened up my phone and I'm just like, let me just see what's going on in the world. Let me check out the news. I don't really have some sort of gauge as to what the world is like and what's going on. There was nothing surprising in there. And so 20 minutes later, I find myself reading Signal text message transcripts. And I'm like, what in the world am I doing with my life? This was supposed to be God time. And somehow Doge has co-opted it. And I'm not kidding. This is my real life. And what I need you to hear is I am a pastor. I kind of joke when I say I get paid to do this, but actually I get paid to do this. And yet, here I am making the same mistakes that many of you probably make, with the same real pulls and temptations that many of you probably feel. And while at the end of the day, in all of my scrolling, I can say, yep, I am a little bit more informed now, and I can put that cute little joke in my sermon, but there's not really much else I can do about all that stuff that I just used my time consuming. And then here's the scripture waiting for me. I know, God, that mere mortals cannot run their own lives, that men and women don't have what it takes to take charge of their own life. This is what Lent is. It's not about shaming you. It's not about, man, do better next time. It's not about any of that. It's about finally getting to the reality that, man, it's really hard, maybe even impossible, for us to get it together and to do it right. Even when we know, even when we want, even when we are aching for the right thing, we still get it wrong so often. And what is God's response to us when that happens? Well, the end of Lent is Good Friday and Easter. So you tell me, what is God's response to all of your not getting it together, not getting it right? Our wholeness is not about our finally getting it together. Our wholeness is not about you finally getting it right. Our wholeness is not about you finally praying enough or praying right or having enough Bible verses memorized or enough of the scripture read. Your wholeness is all about reconciliation. It is about your being brought back home, to use the parables language. It is about your being made sons, to use the parables language, of God. That's the point. That's what all of this is about. And so, I want you to notice something a little bit different about the parable this morning. Do you notice how both sons throughout the entire parable resist actually being sons? So the younger son, right, so he goes off and he does his thing in Vegas or wherever the heck it was. He leaves home, thumbs his nose at the father. I wish you were dead. Just give me the stuff. He moves out to a far distant country, literally lives recklessly, squanders everything he has, is living in pig field, has no paycheck, is wanting just to eat the pig's food. He comes to his senses, and in verse 18 of Luke chapter 15, he says this, I will set out and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. Yeah, you have. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired laborers. Now that's our 21st century, we've come through the horrors of the Civil War language, but it's literally treat me as one of your slaves. Treat me as a servant in your household. I'm not worthy to be a son. And so he thinks that maybe I can be cared for by being a servant because I'm not worth being a son. I'm somehow not capable of that any longer, and so I'll be a servant. And the father's response is, of course, he runs out to him, right, shaming himself. He throws the robes of inheritance and rulership on him. He throws the signet ring of the family on him. He gives him probably more than he had as a son, as a younger son before. And the whole picture here is he is making it very, 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 very clear, you are not a servant in my household. You are, and you always have been, my son. And Jesus tells this story to tell us what God is like. So I don't know what you think God is like. I don't know what you think God thinks of you and your many mistakes. I don't know what you think that God feels about you after you finally got it wrong again for the 1,000th time. But what Jesus says that God thinks of you in those moments is that you are my beloved son, and in you I am well pleased. But there's another son in the story, another son who doesn't like being a son, and this is the older son. In verse 29, we see the older son doing very much the same exact thing that the younger son did, very similar language. Right, so the father has prepared a feast for the younger son, and the older son, being the mature elder child that he is standing outside, arms crossed, lip out, just absolutely pouting, enraged at his father, enraged at his son, enraged at this whole sham of an institution called this household, and he refuses to go in and celebrate the feast. And he says this in verse 29. He answered his father and said, Look, for so many years, I have been your son, and you have loved me, and I have loved you. Oh, wait, no, that's not what it says at all. For so many years, I have served you, and I have been obedient. I've never neglected a command of yours. And yet you never loved me. Nope. And yet you never gave me a goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. This guy had to have been a teenager. Like, I just want to be with my friends. All these years I have served you, right? Same language used from the younger son. I've been a good servant. I've never neglected a single thing that you've commanded me to do. And you've never given me anything. The kicker is when he reveals at the end, right? The so in Greek carries like a ton of weight, with the result that this would be the thing that I really actually care about and want, so that I might celebrate with my friends. He reveals that he wanted this whole time a life without his father and without his brother. That his obedience, his servitude, his faithfulness wasn't about the father at all and had nothing to do with his younger brother. It was all about him and his friends. And we see both sons desperately seeing themselves and seeing their father in utilitarian terms. Now, you're familiar with this, right? So I know utilitarian, big fancy word. I know, I went to school, y'all. This is when we use people to get what we want. Or when people use us to get what they want. Now that sounds like so dastardly. You're like, how dare you? This is your employment, my friends. I hate to tell you, you are using your employee or your employer to get a paycheck. And your employer is probably using you to get some work done. Now, most of our relationships are utilitarian. Sam Wells argues that all of our relationships are utilitarian and that what Jesus is doing is he's transforming them, turning them into something else. I don't really hang out with them. I just don't get much out of it. I don't really go to that church. I don't get much from it anymore, right? This is the sort of language that we might be familiar with. But here, what we see is they're really concerned about what they can offer the Father and what the Father can do for them. And so when we think about some of the really popular understandings of salvation, hey, you'd better do this for God so that God can do this for you. There is a transaction. Now, I know as Americans, we would never think of life through the lens of transactions. That's super unfamiliar with us. But this is what happens with the gospel when we turn our relationship into a contract with God, where God needs something from us, and so he's going to leverage over us some sort of power. And unfortunately, if you're a parent, you've experienced this, especially if you're the parent of a 4-year-old like I am, where you're like, I'm out of ideas. Do you want candy? I need you to do this thing so you can have some candy. Dang it, I did it again, right? And so the question on the table is God and our relationship with God a contract relationship? And the answer is profoundly no. We are not defined by our usefulness. My friends, you are not defined by your usefulness. That's not who you are. That's not why you matter. It's not why you matter to God, and it ought not be why you matter to someone else. There will become a day where you are useless. And hopefully it's a really far, far, far away day, but many of you have experienced this at some point in your life. I just have nothing to offer here. And yet, the good news of Jesus Christ says that you are lovable, that you matter, and that you are worthy, a part of whatever it is that you think you need to produce. And this is where what we do is we make subtle attempts to find our wholeness apart from God, even in church, where we, like the younger son or like the older son, will do all sorts of neat little theology tricks to really make it not about what God is doing, but about what we do. And so we think that our value to the church, to God, to spiritual maturity is based on, stop me if you've heard this one before, look at all my serving. Man, I've served on AV 3 weeks this month, 3 Sundays. I am the kids team. Shout out to Christine, kids pastor. That's right. But man, look at how much I give. If I left this church would crumble, right? Look at how dutifully I show up Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. I'm a good Christian. Or we do it in other ways, right? So maybe it's not in what you do. Maybe it's just in what you know. And this one's really, really popular with us. It's about look at all my Bible knowledge. Or really, it's I don't have Bible knowledge. So I need to get more Bible knowledge. Then God will really love me. And then I'll be really close to him because I know this Hebrew word and that Hebrew word. Look, I'm at this Bible study, or I listen to this preacher, or this podcast, and I'm reading this book. Or maybe you define it by your lack. And look how much I've squandered. Look what I can't do. Look what I'm unable to bring to the table. Look at how much I've screwed up. Look at how far out into the distant land I've actually wandered. What we reject when we do this is what God is so clearly revealing to us in Jesus Christ. What Jesus is showing us in this story. And it's why I go back to be man, one day when I'm face to face with Jesus, I just be tell me the story. I want to hear it from your lips. And no doubt, he'll probably put some sort of personalized spin on it. There was this one dude named Brandon, and he was a mess, right? I don't know. But this story shows us a lot about who God is, and it shows us a lot about who we are. And what it makes really, really clear is that God's love for you is not conditioned on what you do. And what can hold back God's love for you? God loves you. And that means that you are God's child. Like it or not, sorry. And so no matter what you have done, no matter what you have failed to do, God says, you belong to me, will you please come home? This is the message of this story. And while both sons see their father's love as contractual, Jesus reveals that God's love is unconditional. It's abundant. It's gracious. It's generous. And so how freely and how generously does God love you? Because I know y'all like spreadsheets, and I know you want to see it in black and white. So there's another reading of this text. It was put forth by what many people call the 20th century's most influential theologian. His name is Karl Barth. If you're a nerd, you've heard of him. Congratulations. And he agrees, right? He's not saying, no, we should read it this way instead of that way. He agrees with the reading that we've laid out, right? A sinful son goes out into a distant country and, right, squanders and comes back, right? All of that, yes. He said this is what he calls the exegetical reading of this text. It is the right way to read it. It is what Jesus intended in this context. And then he says, and yet there's also another reading. You can go further and see that in Jesus, God has done for us what we won't, what we can't, what we're unable to do. In this story, what you can see is that there is another son in this story. There is another son who leaves the father and goes out into a far country and enters into the squalor and the God-forsakenness and the cursedness of the younger son's reality and brings that son back home and anoints him with robes that are not his, and gives him a feast to celebrate his return. So for Bart's, Jesus enters into the distant country with us. And as Jesus journeys into the far country, into the forsakenness, into the cursedness of the human condition, humanity is brought back to the heart of God. This is what the cross is doing for us. This is what God's reconciling love is on display in Jesus Christ. And the whole point of God's suffering, of God's humiliation, of God's entering into the unthinkable is so that you and I might become or might return home. And so your peace, your wholeness, your life, as Jesus will call it, it has all of it has been taken up into Jesus, and you have already been brought home. And so then what's yours to do is to give attention to that, to cast yourself on that. That when you get it wrong again tomorrow, to remember that. What it means for you to be made whole is not that you would finally get it right. It's not that you go to the good place instead of the bad place, even though I think those things that one day will be true. What it means to be made whole is for you to be reconciled to the God of love. And you have been. God has brought you back to God, back to the God you were made to know and to love and to live in communion with way back in that first story in Genesis. And in that, in your belonging to God, and your being reconciled to God, and your being with God, that is what makes us whole. Being with God. And so we, the wayward sons and daughters of God, who've been brought home, this morning we find a feast has been prepared for us. One where we can receive God's very presence, God's very self. One where we can experience our reconciliation, where we can be made new, not by what we do, but by what God is doing and has done. May this be the heart of our week. Maybe this be the heart of our life. May this be the thing that we come back to over and over and over again, because it is the good news, my brothers and sisters.
That concludes today's sermon. As always, if there's anything we can do to help serve you or help you connect with our church, we encourage you to say hey at redemptionhru.com/connect. We want to foster a community where everyone is seen, known, and loved. Now, as you go about your day, go in the love of the Father and by His Spirit, embody the hope of Jesus to the world around you.